Set for me to come up, Senator Starr?
Well, good morning. We're back from our break from this morning. Earlier, we talked with our congressional delegation and had a good conversation with them. And, now we're moving to cannabis. And former Senator John Rogers sent us a list of some of the.
Yeah, I think we all.
Oh, you already, you have a new one. I added a couple things to the.
Oh, he's added to it.
Oh my goodness, this is the 20 list. So
But,
yes, you want the list of 20.
Yeah, one extra.
I think it was a week or two ago that John sent that in. We talked about it in committee and thought we would invite John and the cannabis people in to talk about, well, as a grower and a producer, thought we'd hear from me first and then we'd move on to others to see how things are working for them. So welcome, it's good to see you and have you back in the building.
Excellent. Thank you, Senator Starr, and thank you, committee. I haven't met.
Should we introduce ourselves?
Yeah, why don't we do a little quick run around?
Well, Brian Collmore, the Rutland District. John and I know each other.
Irene Renner, Chittenden North, including Fairfax.
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
And I know the rest of the cast.
Richard and I
And this one too. I
and
remember
Ryan,
him.
so anyways.
Excellent. Yes, thank you. I'll launch right in. So as the senators who served with me know, I grew hemp for years before adult use cannabis became legal. And one of the things that I've talked with both James Pepper and Kerry Gajer at the CCB about this, we did a heck of a lot of work with this committee on hemp, and I think we built a heck of a hemp program. And I was extremely disappointed to hear that the Agency of Ag gave up on our hemp program and sent it back to the USDA. I hope they don't give up on dairy farmers when they get down to a certain number. And you know, the things that bothers me about cannabis, both hemp and the adult use cannabis, is the legislature's put together programs that are supposed to support themselves in fees. And no other department or agency that I know of in state government has that charge. The cannabis, both types, are creating sales. It creates sales tax and economic development, and that goes back into the general fund. Some general fund money should be used to prop up both of those organizations as an aside. But what I would like to do is have hemp defined as any cannabis with a THC level of under 1% and put the hemp program under the CCB. It's the exact same plant. It has different cannabinoids. I personally believe these cannabinoids are going to be more important than ever. There are a lot of people who go for just the highest THC. Those are the folks, they're like the folks that want to drink their whiskey straight. But the other cannabinoids, for medicinal purposes, for pain relief, for inflammation, and for the entourage effect, the experience of actually being mellowed or calmed without being super psychoactive, the CBD and the CBG are extremely important. So, and my hope would be that the hemp growers would only have to register, pay a registration fee. I just threw $100 out there just for your information. I've got a ton or two of hemp biomass sitting in my barn right now that I'll probably have processed myself at some point. But the last offer I got on my hemp was $1.75 a pound. Now, your plants average under a pound and the seed cost me $1. So you can see there's not much profit in hemp today. The only reason we're still doing it is because when we started out, we had an idea that the hemp prices were not going to remain what they were. We didn't think they would drop so precipitously so quickly. But we make our own products. And so the only hemp we grow now is to make our own products. And you can draw sort of a parallel with people who are in the dairy business. If you sell your milk in a bulk tank, you're probably not making much. If you're making cheese or yogurt on the farm and adding that value, you can actually make more money. So we've been able to stay in the hemp business that way, making our products. We get feedback from people. That's really what's kept me in the business. I have chronic back pain, so that's why one of the reasons I got into it. And I use it every day and it helps me with my pain. But we've heard incredible feedback from our customers about how it's changed their lives. And that really, excuse me, makes it rewarding enough to make you want to stay in the business. We're not making a ton of money with the CBD, but it is growing and it is somewhat profitable. So hemp is considered an agricultural product, and you'll see on my number 4 on the list, all cannabis grown outdoors should be considered an agricultural product. It's a plant, it's agriculture. Growing plants is agriculture. The wording would have to be played with, and I know we've got masters in our legislative staff with wording. We don't want the ag agency to have anything to do with it. But for the growing of the plant, it needs to be considered agriculture. If you have a farm that is fallow and you've got a neighbor that wants to get into the cannabis business and rent a piece of land from you, if it's over 1,000 square feet, you got to take it out of current use. Now, if you got to take it out of current use, you're going to get your current use penalty, which is going to cost you more than the guy can afford to pay you for the rent. So nobody's going to do it. We got farm buildings sitting empty. It could be used to dry. That's where I dry mine, in an old dairy barn. In the hay barn, it's 40 by 190. People actually got in trouble this year for drying in some of their ag buildings because their ag buildings were in current use. And I think that's just silly. For current use and land use, both state and municipal, it should be considered agriculture under the CCB.
And why couldn't it be there? Is there any?
Just because our laws don't specifically say that it is. Currently, it's not considered agriculture. And I think that was something that happened in the other chamber.
So that that should be an issue that we need to chat.
If it's hemp, it's agriculture. If it's cannabis, it's not.
It's exactly the same plant. I make the comparison between a Granny Smith apple and a Red Delicious. It's exactly the same plant, but they have different flavors. So the hemp and the THC have different cannabinoids. That's the only difference. It's the exact same plant.
Do they look exactly alike?
You couldn't tell the difference. Walking through the field, you can't tell the difference.
So they should both be considered ag.
It should be all ag, right, for every purpose except for the agency of
And
ag.
then
needs to
have
be
the
kept out of it.
Cannabis Control Board look after.
Yeah, everything to do with both the hemp and the THC cannabis should be under the CCB in my view. Yeah, and then line 5 is sort of a reiteration. All cannabis grown and processed on existing farms, traditionally farmland and farm buildings, it should be considered agriculture, both state and at the state and municipal level.
And who told you your barn or a barn couldn't be in current use?
Well, my barn isn't in current use, so it doesn't really matter to me, but I heard through, we're a pretty tight, small guys are a pretty tight knit group, and we do a lot of networking and talking with each other. And so there's a lot of folks that are saying that there's a lot of problems out there with it not being agriculture.
Okay. Go ahead, Rick.
So if it was agriculture in the barn, the indoors.
Yeah.
Because we've had other conversations about and moving towards having further conversations about what tips Act 250. If it was agriculture in the burn, it would tip Act
Right,
250.
exactly.
But now, because it's a commercial product, it would tip back to 50.
And there again, most farmers are not gonna put their farm under Act 250. They're just not gonna do it. So it's missed economic opportunity for farmers in farmland to not have it in agriculture.
Well, is it a commercial product before it goes in the barn? I mean, how's it, milk's a commercial product, so doesn't it have to dry before it's worth much?
Yes, absolutely. It's got, yeah.
So it's a raw product as it goes into the
Mhm.
facility.
Yep.
Remind us of the licenses. You have a growing license. And there's the
Right.
middleman is the processor.
There's growing, there's manufacturing, there's processing, there's retail.
But the growing part,
The growing part is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The growing, it should be agriculture, especially outdoors. If you're putting it in the former Toys R Us building in Williston, I can see that being commercial. You're in a commercial space, you're in a commercial building. But when you live on a farm or are renting from a farmer like Richie, whose family has been farming for generations on that farm, it should be considered agriculture.
Yep.
Every aspect of it should be. It is agriculture. You're growing plants.
but in the barn, if you go over 1,000 square feet, which isn't all that big a space.
It isn't all that big.
30 by 32 by 32. is
Well,
all-
10 by 100 is the easy way to figure it, or 20 by 50, right?
But if you, in the barn, you go over 1,000 square feet, then it becomes commercial too.
Yeah.
And then would have to, the question of what the commercial space is versus,
The ag space, exactly. Yeah, it's way more confusing than it needs to be.
I'd say quite a lot more.
So currently, I take my biomass to my processor, and he turns it into distillate, which looks like honey. It's thick, golden colored stuff. I can't, and I believe the CCB, I talked with James, and this is one of their legislative asks, but I can't go and pick up my own distillate because it's been concentrated. This puts the farmers at a serious disadvantage, because now I have to pay somebody to go pick that up and take it to the manufacturer or somebody else. I need to be just like a sugar maker where I can have my liters sitting on a shelf, and when a manufacturer calls me up and says I need a liter of distillate, I can take that distillate to them. Otherwise, we're basically making it so farmers are very limited to wholesale or less than wholesale prices because we can't handle our own concentrates.
In that UPS or,
No, you can't send any of that stuff through a carrier. You have to deliver it.
so it has to be a licensed carrier?
Yeah, so like manufacturers and the processors and the wholesalers are all in their license able to move those concentrates. But I think it was more an oversight than anything else. But if the small farmers are gonna make it, we need to be able to value add, just like other types of agriculture are allowed to value add. That's the only way we're gonna be able to make it. And on that note, I'm not sure how much you all know about these processes, but there is a process called ice water extraction, which I would like farmers to be allowed to use. There are no solvents, no alcohol. You basically put the flour into ice water and agitate it. And the trichomes, which are the little tiny pieces of the plant that hold the medicine, drop to the bottom. You put it through a series of screens And what you're left with is just the hash, they call it hash, but it's just the medicinal part, and then you get rid of the plant material that has very little or no value left to it. It's a very super simple, safe extraction method in a way for farmers to add value to their product that we think we should be allowed to do.
And who would be opposed to that?
I don't know if anybody would be opposed to it. I think you're gonna have to wait and see. I don't know, maybe some of the processors would be, but I can't see it because there's not very many people offering that service. So I don't think there's gonna be opposition to it, but I've been in this building long enough to know anything can happen.
Yeah, you never know.
Many of us growers would like the ability to sell seeds and live plants to the public without an additional license. It's just another way to make a little bit of money in the springtime when us outdoor growers, you know, are pretty much out of our plant material and spending money on fertilizers and irrigation and all that other stuff. And some people see it as another revenue stream.
And how would you control who's bought seeds and who's growing this product? See, now you have to be licensed and all that to be able to do that.
Right, but we also have the law that allows homeowners to grow their, I think it's 8 total. Anybody know for sure? 8 total and 2 mature?
Yeah, 2 and 7.
8 total and 2 mature plants. So that means that home growers could come and buy their 8 plants from you in the springtime so that they didn't have to start them, or they could buy their seeds from you. Because one of the problems even folks like us are having is getting the genetics. And, you know, a lot of the people that are in the business have been growing in the black market, so they already have their strains figured out and everything. But like myself, I gave up the black market a long time ago when I got into politics. So, I don't have any of my old strains, so I'm starting from scratch. And it's quite a challenge because you have to trust the guy on the other end of the phone, because you're sending them an awfully large check, and you don't know what's in those little brown seeds and if it's going to produce what they told you it's going to produce or not. And both in the hemp and cannabis industry, there have been an awful lot of people selling seeds that are not what they promised them to be. So this is just a way to help.
I take it they're a lot better than what you thought you were going to get.
Sometimes.
And you can count them on one hand.
Yeah, exactly. One of the requirements that I clearly do not understand is operating on only one parcel of land. Myself personally, we have the place where we started our hemp business, where we've got a small indoor grow room where we start the plants, and we've got a greenhouse attached to the workshop where we take them after they're germinated and started and put them out and get them ready for the field. In 2019, we bought the farm that's been in my family for some 200 years to try to increase it. Where we were before, there wasn't much farmland. We wanted to increase the scale of our hemp operation at that time. Bought the farm. It's really bad timing. Just before COVID hit, we opened our bed and breakfast and 2 months before it closed. And because of COVID, and the hemp market went like that. But anyways, so currently I have a 1.5 miles down the road, a perfect place to start my plants. And under the current framework, I can't use it because it's not attached to my farm. So it would be nice if we could expand it to at least 2 parcels. I mean, just like many dairy farmers, all their parcels where they hay aren't connected. The land doesn't abut, and I don't know, as long as you have it listed so the CCB knows where everything you have is, I don't understand why we would limit it to 1 parcel. So I think it was maybe an oversight, but there was probably somebody that thought it was a good idea. Let's see, where am I here? Number 11, we're hoping to have some sort of direct-to-consumer sales, because there again, so bring them. Yeah, got a sample right here. So we have the expense of the genetics. This is one of our single joints in the tube. So we've already paid, I think we bought enough seeds, so it's $3 a seed. And we did the tilling and the planting and the care of the plants. And we grew them out and harvested them and dried them and broke them down and trimmed them and cured them and ground them up and stuffed them in a paper in a glass tube with a ridiculous label that doesn't leave any room for a story about your own farm. And we're selling those for $5.95 a piece. Now, when they go into a retail store, most of the retailers are doubling the price. So they're making $5.95 on that joint. I'm not making $5.95 on that joint. I'm selling it for $5.95, but I'm making a fraction of that because of all the cost I incurred going into it. And even if it starts out as a limited opportunity to sell via special events or limited number of days a month that we could sell direct to the public, I could actually sell that for the 12 or 15 bucks that the retail stores are getting. Back to
What is that?
that, it's a joint. It's a cigarette. You want it, you can smoke it later instead of your other one.
Probably better for you.
It is way better for you, non-carcinogenic.
I'll let Brian.
Okay.
But anyways, it's just another way that the farmers can make a little bit more money, just like a farmer taking fruits and vegetables to the farmer's market is getting retail instead of wholesaling it to the store. And you know, my perspective in both the hemp and the cannabis when I was here is trying to help the small Vermont farmers be able to make a living and stay in it.
Licensing glass, also not plastic.
How many
That's one
of
the
the,
rules.
how many of the small producers of 1,000 square feet make things like this?
A lot of them, because even though there's more labor in that than anything else, it's adding the most value to your product. And that's another problem in the market right now, is that I've heard some farmers getting ridiculously low offers on their biomass. So just like milk, the middleman's trying to buy it low and sell it high. So this is a way we can kind of control our own destiny. And you do have a lot of labor costs in it. Believe me, it takes a long time to get that thing prepped and ready for sale.
Did we prescribe what you had to put on that label?
Yes, and it's completely over the top. You can't even, you can barely fit everything that we're required to put on the label. And like I said, it leaves you no room to tell your story. It leaves you just the bare minimum to be able to get your information on the tube. Yeah. One of the other things that I had to do and all growers have to do, I think all cannabis licensees have to do, is they made me escrow $2,500 in case I go out of business. And like I said to the CCB on my application, if I go out of business, I'm going to try to sell it to another licensed establishment. And if I can't, I'll put it in a pile and light a match to it, just like I have done with hemp that wasn't fit for consumption, or I had too much hemp. I've had to burn it a couple times, and it doesn't cost me a darn thing. But what these rules have done is taken $2,500 of my money that I could really use right now, and it's sitting in an escrow in case I go out of business, which I think is silly. If you have a big retail shop and you've got thousands of items in the back room, maybe that makes sense. But for the outdoor farmers, to me, it doesn't make any sense. It's wasting my money and setting my money on the sideline.
So it's 2,500.
Yeah, you sat in an escrow account. Number 13, remove the requirements that employees of grow operations need a background check and pay $50 to the CCB for a registration. We don't do this with any other employees. You know, I have feelings about the whole background check thing anyway. But anyways, if you want to background check the owner, make sure, you know, they got nothing, no red flags, fine. But we should be able to hire people that we trust. And what this does is, like, I have a son that lives in Virginia. So he comes up for a weekend or a week vacation. And you know, growing up on the farm, you take everybody's help you can. When people show up and they offer to help and you're working, well, he can't work. He can't come out to the field with us and help me.
Why? Just
Because I have to do it, he would have to go through a background check in the application process and send another $50 to the CCB. And I paid $6,500 for my license and put $2,500 in an escrow and another $1,800 in liability insurance, which I don't understand, because if anybody's in my crop, they're on posted property. Then nobody's supposed to be there. And so it's just cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching,
So
cha-ching.
you got 10 grand into your 1,000 square feet.
I have a tier 3, so I got 625 plants outdoors. Is what I count. But to me, it's nickel and diming us, and we should have control over who we hire. And why shouldn't we maybe hire somebody who has a shaded past? Shouldn't we give people a chance in society? And it should be just like every other business in the state. It should be our choice who we trust and who we hire.
Well, when the burden would be on the owner anyways, if something,
Captain goes down with the ship.
yeah.
How is that enforced?
I don't know if there's any enforcement. I don't think there's much enforcement in the whole process. And that's why I think a lot of the process is quite silly, because they've got these requirements and they don't have enough manpower to even check up on it. I went down and did a delivery at Mountain Girl down in Rutland.
Yep.
And he said he keeps sending in his reports and sends them an email. Am I doing this right? Is everything okay? Hasn't even heard back from him. We sent in some product registrations a couple months ago. We haven't even heard back from them. They don't have the manpower to do all of this stuff. So requiring us to jump through those hoops is a little bit silly.
Maybe they haven't got the $50 to register their employees.
And then the other place they get us for $50, and from my perspective, it's not even clear what we're supposed to be doing is product registration. And like I said, we sent in our product registration and they haven't even gotten back to us to tell us it's okay or not. But every product you put in, they charge you $50 for. I think my license fee is more than enough to cover everything I need to do. So if I put this strain in this tube, is this one product, and I put a different strain in this tube and it's a second product? Is it a second product if I put 3 of those in a box instead of 1 in a tube? It's like, to me, it's just silly. We should have to send in our labels, make sure we got everything on them, and register the product, no fee. And it's determined to be registered unless they get hold of us and say, no, there's a problem, you didn't put something on your label. It's just way more difficult. I have a friend that sent one in November and still hasn't heard back. Now, us as business people, I'm not in the black yet. I'm still in the red. And I'm hoping in the next 2 weeks, I'm gonna finally be in the black, but that's getting no money for my labor. And I basically worked 2 full-time jobs last year because my masonry and excavating paid for the farm. And so,
Oh, you're a real farmer then.
well, I don't get quite as many hours in as I did when we were milking cows, but I get plenty in.
Yeah, but if you get into the black, you're not a real.
I guess that's probably true, Senator Starr, but I'm really hoping this is a different type of farming. I'm really hoping there's actually a profit in it.
Well, we can prove you're not a real farmer.
Okay,
I mean,
well,
that you are a real farmer,
I-
because you're running in the.
I think I'm hoping not to be a real farmer then.
If you're off farm job and your spouse is off farm job, aren't all taken up by the firm, it's not a real firm.
Okay, well, so far it's a real farm, but I'm hoping to make it not one. I think the CCB pushed the legislature to charge much less for license fees, and I believe it was the House that decided to go up where they did. It's, as I explained before, it's extremely expensive to get into this, and I think there's a lot of average Vermonters out there that wanted to be in this business and looked at the cost, and I've talked with a few of them and said, I couldn't do it. I cannot get in, and so there needs to be some structure. I think it should be reduced for everybody, especially outdoor growing, because outdoor growing is less, the product's less valuable, and it's tougher and it's seasonal. But there should be some incentive, especially for new growers, to allow them a reduced rate, at least for the first year, so they can get in, get their feet under and make a little money, then charge them full on, whatever, but it.
Well, why wouldn't you charge them on their output? Because if you're selling product else, you should be making some money on that product. Or if you had a real bad year and your third year, say it rained every day or whatever, and you had a bad year.
I mean, it happens. I think that might be too involved and too confusing, but it's a risk, just like any other type of farming. We started with just over 625 plants and ended out under 600 plants because you have a windstorm and a couple get snapped off. You have powdery mildew show up in a couple places, and you get rid of those plants as fast as you can so it doesn't spread to the other plants. I mean, there's things that happen just like there is with any other farming. But I personally think the license fees are still plenty high. But if we reduce the license fees, we have to allow some general fund money to go in, as I think it should, as this is generating tax revenue for the state. Just like every other agency and department in the state gets general fund money. These guys should be no different. And that's number 16. The CCB should not be expected to operate on fees. And then for my hemp license, I had to go through a background check. I did FBI background check. It cost me about $50. I had to go to the sheriff's office, do my fingerprints. They sent it in. Well, for some reason, we went with a private company to do the background checks. The background check cost me $500.
Well, you must have had a long list of stuff on there.
No, it costs everybody $500, even the ones that don't make as much trouble as I do. I think it's excessively expensive, and I question the need for a background check at all, but I wanted to be sure you guys are aware of that. So I had to go through 2 different background checks. One cost me $50 and one cost me $500.
So what was the difference between the two?
The difference is the $50 one is done by the FBI, and the $500 one is done by a private company that the CCB contracts with.
And it's required, the second one is required.
It's
They're both
required. Yeah, they're both requirements. It's excessive for a background check. It's another excessive cost that we shouldn't have to go through.
So why didn't the FBI background check?
Well, that's a good question for my friend James Pepper when he comes in. I can't answer it.
Because you'd think the FBI would.
You would think that might be the premium background check, wouldn't you?
Yeah. What?
We should-
Knowing the way the government works, maybe I better rethink that.
Yeah, I think they actually did try to use that, and then the FBI refused to process them.
Well, except that they processed mine for hemp, and you can put on the form for personal use, and the FBI can't refuse it. So, I mean, it'd be pretty dumb to say I'm growing pot to the FBI because it's still federally illegal. So I'm sure they wouldn't do it if you said you were in the cannabis business. But I think that can all be gotten around because every citizen has the right to ask for a background check for personal use. So that could be gotten around. Currently, under the rules, we're not supposed to gift any cannabis, which I think there again is an oversight. If I'm going into a retail operation, I think they want to, well, I know I want them to have samples of my product to try to make sure they know what they're getting. I mean, I wouldn't buy 1,000 cases of chocolate chip cookies without trying a cookie.
At least one.
At least one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we should be able to gift, especially to cancer patients. I have a friend who has, at great risk to themselves, gives cannabis products to cancer patients. And there have been miraculous results from some of these products with cancer patients. And I think it's silly for us as a state to not allow people who have the generosity in their heart to try to help others, and that right now it's illegal to gift those products even to cancer patients. And so I think that's something that needs to be addressed.
Well, I could understand that a little better than not being able to gift a prospective seller, a retailer, if you wanted to take something in for a retail outlet to sell. I mean, you'd think they would be allowed to try something.
I certainly wouldn't want to sell somebody's product from my store without knowing exactly what that product was. One of the big problems is banking. And, you know, we required that garbage collectors pick up recycling and compost, and they didn't want it. I think credit unions are, I believe, licensed under the state of Vermont, and I don't know why we can't require credit unions to offer banking services to people. Right now, I was at a retailer, and he told me that the credit union, and I think there's only one that's doing it, is charging him $1,500 a month to have an account there. And it's robbery. The banking and insurance, it's legal robbery. If it says cannabis on it, they're putting it to us. It's just not right. I got approved for a cash management plan, but it's still a problem because you've got to get paid and you've got to pay your bills. And it's really putting us in a pickle. And us small businesses, all my friends that I'm working with, the manufacturers and processors, one of my friends in processing and manufacturing told me last month he had to borrow money from his sister to get his personal bills paid through the month. There's a lot of people out there that have put everything they have into trying to get this rolling. Like any other business, it takes some time to get back into the black. And this is making it even harder when those guys are taking such a big pinch out of the limited funds we have to work with right now. It's really a challenge.
Let me ask a question about that. So you can't use a bank, right?
Right. Can't use a bank.
So it's all, so in a way, nobody can really monitor the funds anyhow.
Well, we're supposed to all be keeping track of it.
Right,
for the
okay.
CCB, but
Okay.
yeah,
But how do you start anything without being able to put money into a bank?
it's unbelievably hard, and you can't borrow money from a bank. And that's one of my things is, so how many average Vermonters have the money sitting in their bank account to start up a business like this without being able to borrow?
How much, do 1,000 square feet in how much would you put into this business?
How much would it cost to set it up?
Yeah, how much is the startup?
So if you have a existing empty building, I figured the startup's $100,000 to upfit 1,000 square feet to get electrical, water, all your lighting, all your air handling, and that's not going high end. You would spend $100,000 easy. And like I said, how many average Vermonters can pull that? They can't. It's not there.
And they supposedly this was set up to help Vermonters get into it,
Exactly.
and it's,
And that's why we've got so many people trying to get their start outdoors. I don't have my indoor grow set up, even though I applied for a tier 3 mix. I haven't been able to use my indoor because I don't have it upfit, because I haven't made enough money to upfit it yet. And as soon as we get enough money coming in, we're gonna start upfitting and start our indoor grow, but it's a struggle for average people. And
Are we setting ourselves up for people who have money from outside? the
exactly,
country?
we're setting ourselves up for MSOs to come in and apply for a tier 3, which is 15,000 square feet. And they set up their own manufacturing and they set up their own store and they start underselling all the rest of us, because let's remember, they're operating in other states. And so those guys, just like a Walmart, they'll operate at a loss if they have to put you out. And that's what happened in Washington State. The big ones put the little ones out, and now you have weed Walmarts. And that's my last point on this new sheet, is reduce the maximum indoor grow operations to 10,000 square feet. Maybe let the ones that are already in operate. But more and more of those MSOs are coming in.
well, how big are they?
15,000 square feet is a pretty good size building.
I'd say so.
And, you know, and they've got the money. They can come in and set it up, bing, bang, boom, they're in full scale operation because they're already operating in other states and they've got income coming from all those operations. So it's a direct challenge to what myself and a lot of legislators wanted, which was to try to prop up the small craft industry, because those MSOs are going to take all that profit out of state. All us little guys that are here today, we spend our money in the community. It's going to go around and around the community and benefit Vermont, where those MSOs are going to take that money out of state.
It's like our small farmers keep talking about.
Gobbled up.
Very similar.
Gobbled up.
This is small farming.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
This
It's
is small farming.
the potential though to get gobbled up by the big guys is huge.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just gonna be snarky. Well, we could miss a step. We did not have any small farmers and just go straight to big ones.
Headed. Thank you. I've taken up a lot of time and we've got a couple other folks to get
Yeah,
to, so
we should hear from them.
thank you.
Well, thank you, John. Who, you next?
Sure. Hi, my name's Adam Gross. Everybody calls me Tito.
Chief.
So I agree with everything John was saying. I think it's all incredibly important. I am going to build on it a little bit, talk about some anecdotal stuff that's been happening to me, and build on it a bit. But mostly just to grab a hold of what John was saying, it's so important for these small Vermont farms, because you see these other states and they haven't taken these measures, and Vermont tried to make it special by gearing it towards small farms, but then these little things that are still sticking around, making it so difficult. Vermont does have the potential to have this really incredible scene here. It's so different than all the rest of the country, and I just love that. And so I'm here to help preserve that. I'm going to go a little bit farther than John and also say that indoor cannabis should be considered agriculture as well. A friend of mine took over indoor lettuce plant. I don't know what you want to call it, a manufacturing building for lettuce. Now that was considered agriculture. You know, to the farmer growing indoor lettuce or growing indoor cannabis or anything else for that matter, it's all the same. You know, you're still dealing with all the same stuff. Also, I definitely think hemp has got to be considered or defined as cannabis with a THC level of under 1%, like John was saying. I was growing indoor hemp, super high CBD. I had a couple of cultivars strains that were excellent, really high CBD, over 20%, which is like, you're talking serious medicinal benefit from these plants. But the THC was 0.5 instead of 0.3, and I had to literally, Mike DiTomasi from that current hemp agency, they come over, I literally had to bury it in the ground with dirt and a shovel. Like, it was just awful. It was one of the worst moments of my life. And that was medicine that people needed, you know, so that, and over the technicality, you know, you want to say 0.3 or 0.03, 0.05, like, it's, none of it is going to get you high on any level. It's, you know, everything under 1% is very much not going to get you high in the sense like regular THC cannabis would. I also agree that all things cannabis need to be overseen by the CCB. I'm also a retailer, so I'm dealing with this and the fact that, like, you know, the cannabis we're growing, people that choose to smoke it or vaporize, dry vape the healthy way, they still have to get a tobacco license. I mean, these products are not meant for tobacco at all. 0.0% meant for tobacco. Yeah, we have to get a tobacco license, and then we get those stings, those DLL stings, and you know, it's just so bizarre. It's not helping.
So you have to get a tobacco license to be able to sell cannabis.
To be able to sell a cannabis pipe or any kind of cannabis thing that you would consume cannabis out of, yeah.
And why, well, I guess it's not fair to ask you, but the board, why wouldn't they consider a cannabis license enough if you're in that business?
Yeah, I think a lot of this, is just oversight. I don't necessarily think there's anything, you know, nefariously trying to bend it one way or another. It's just, you know, it's just how it's worked out. As the Cannabis Control Board describes it, they're trying to build a parachute as they're skydiving. You know, so you know, there's definitely a lot of things getting missed for sure. I think it should be that way. I also agree. John brought up a point about making ice water extraction. This is just to people who do this. It's very commonplace, and it's so different than other extraction in the sense that there's no big machinery. There's no solvents. We're talking literally a bag with a mesh bottom and a paddle you're spinning it with. It's like churning butter, but you know, it's like to need you know, a manufacturing license on top of that just to do that, it just seems odd. It just doesn't really make sense. The requirement to only operate on one parcel of land is also extremely limited. So myself as an indoor grower, I have a very small building that we're talking about. I'm a tier 2 grower, so you know, I'm allowed 2,500 square feet of total canopy. All my plants all together only allow that much. So then, you know, I'd like to get a bigger license. You know, in the future after my business works, I'd like to upgrade it and maybe move on. But now, do I have to now shut down that building that I just, you know? John was saying, you know, $100,000 or so to make that investment. For me and my building, try $1 million.
$1 million?
Yeah, I couldn't even fill my whole building at first. I had to just go half because after, you know, tapping every single penny I'd ever had in my life and some money from some family members, that's all I could do. So I mean, the expenses are wild. So for example, if I could take advantage of that tax exemption for farmers on equipment, I mean, you know, that could put a wild amount of money back in my pocket. And I'm trying to do it right with all LED lights and all really cutting edge equipment that's all very green and you know, I'm making all those efforts. It would be great to be considered agriculture because let me tell you, when I got my hands in my soil or I'm watering my plants, it feels all the same to me. I don't see what the difference is. So. Also, he brought up the escrow account. They call it a cessation escrow account. So if you go out of business, you have to have this money in this account ready to go. And I can't wrap my head around that one either because, you know, I'm imagining myself going out of business. Okay, the whole thing doesn't work out, goes out of business. Like, I don't see what that $2,500 is gonna do in that scenario at all. Plus, you know, I have all this equipment. If I went out of business, I'm gonna sell all my equipment. I'm gonna, you know, try to liquidate all my assets. This amount is just stifling those small farmers. because we had to put all this money up front before we were making any revenues. That's why this has been so difficult, so incredibly difficult.
And do you know the purpose of the escrow account?
No, I have never had somebody explain it to me in a way that I can understand. I don't fully get it. The $50 registering for every product is so overbearing. I definitely agree with John very much there. Also about the CCB not operating on fees alone. I think that this market is way too important to Vermont in general to not have parity with other departments. I think it's just too important. This is not only, I also want to say this can make an immense dent in the problem we have of young people leaving the state. I mean, if these small farms are all able to take part in this vibrant new scene we have in this new marketplace, young people are going to stay. I've witnessed it myself, and it's a serious problem, and this can solve it. Let this cool scene we have of, instead of 2 or 3 mega grows. By the way, we're talking 15,000 square feet. In other states, you're talking like 500,000 square feet of mega buildings that you need a golf cart to get from one end to the other, you know? And I love that Vermont has this little patchwork of all small companies. It's so vibrant and exciting, and it's super exciting to young people. So I think we got to do whatever we can to foster it. And also the background checks. Just lastly, that $500 requirement is really intense.
You have to do the same?
Yeah. Every employee you hire has to go through that process.
But those employees don't go through that special, the $500 background check?
That's everybody, owners, employees, everybody.
I mean, that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
We check that out.
Yeah. But I really appreciate your time. I guess that's my 2 cents for today. I kept it quick.
And where are you out of?
I'm in Addison County.
Addison?
Yeah. Right there by the lake.
Maybe it was it his representative senators that put this together?
I don't know if Addison has senators, actually. Addison County have any representation in the Senate?
We have, in the Senate. I only know my House representatives. I'm sorry.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, you're gonna get to know your senators.
Yeah, I know. I know my house. I moved from Bristol, so I didn't mind. You're right.
Well, we'll add that to some study committee. We should give them 2 senators at some point. I'm gonna leave that up to you.
I think we'd be better off to go without.
Maybe
All right,
Rutland County 4.
Welland County, or yeah, we could add it.
Yeah.
That's a good idea, Brian.
It doesn't have
Okay,
that.
thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tito.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Jesse? Are you still
Good
with us?
morning.
There you are.
I'm coming to you guys from Charlotte. Thank you, Senator Sauer. Thank you, Ag Committee, for seeing us today. Thank you, Mr. Rogers and Tito, very much for all that you guys said. I think that covered so much of what I'm here to speak about also. But one thing that I wanted to sort of make kind of clear is our case that what we're dealing with here in Charlotte, we're dealing with oversight from our town that is going above and beyond what the statute for the state has sort of put forth. And they're really finding ways to kind of push cannabis out of Charlotte if they possibly can by creating these new rules and regulations that are going above and beyond, which could all of a sudden be alleviated if we could bring cannabis just under an ag delineation. And so that's something that I'm facing here right now. And my fear is that if this town passes stuff that's going to prohibit that, that's what's going to sort of set a precedence for potentially other towns. And I really want to get ahead of this now before our town sets it up and creates future problems for other cannabis farmers that would want to maybe farm in Charlotte or also in other parts of the state. And that's something that's pretty concerning to us that we're dealing with right now, that's causing a lot of money out of our pocket on top of all these other costs that people have talked about, and time. And one other thing that we're definitely here to advocate for is for, as we spoke of, the direct market sales from our farm. We would love to be able to sell cannabis from our farmers market and just our products alone. And that is something that we feel is something that should be across the board offered to any of these farms that have all this infrastructure already set up. And I thank you guys very much for hearing us today. I'm going to be brief because I know there's some other people that want to speak. But again, I can't say more. I grow plants in the ground from seeds. If this isn't agriculture, I don't know what it is. And that was something also that we haven't defined, is that nobody defined, okay, if it's not agriculture, what is cannabis then? So, thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. So do we have any other witnesses that want to jump in here, the grower?
We have a Jeffrey, Jeffrey's.
Oh, there's,
Yes.
morning, Jeff.
Morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I'm remote from Burlington today.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I just want to say that I did send along over email some material. I have some prepared testimony that I'll be reading from. I'll go through it and I'm happy to take questions. While I'm reading it, please feel free to stop me at any point. I just want to recognize the time here, so I'll try to be quick. But I just want to say thank you, everybody, for holding this space. Thank you, Chair and committee members, for allowing me to speak. It is good to see everyone once again. Happy New Year to everybody. Welcome back to the State House. And thank you again for taking up the important issue of cannabis regulation. I also want to say good morning and thank you to my friends and colleagues that spoke before and those that will come after me. For the record, my name is Jeffrey Pizzatello. I am a longtime legacy cannabis cultivator, indoor regenerative farmer. I'm also the executive director of the Vermont Growers Association. We are the state's cannabis trade association, and though we have growers in our name, we represent the entire supply chain with over 80 members ranging from retailers, growers, manufacturers, labs, to non-plant touching businesses, such as security companies and whatnot. VGA is also the founding member of the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition, and we have been in this committee in years past alongside rural Vermont and Norfolk Vermont and some of my colleagues in that coalition. That coalition includes the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, Green Mountain Patients Alliance, Norfolk Vermont, and rural Vermont, respectively. We like to think that collectively we represent the local communities most impacted and those with the greatest stake in the adult use and medical markets. And I will be giving my testimony today as a member of the coalition. We have been in this committee years past, notably with my colleague Graham of rural Vermont and Maddie Kempner, Policy Director of Norfolk Vermont, names you are likely familiar with, discussing the issues central to our communities we represent. They remain as such. So I've got a list of about 9 priorities that I'm going to go through with just speaking briefly to each of them. Those 9 priorities remain: allocating 20% of the cannabis excise tax revenue to reinvestment in communities disproportionately harmed in a community reinvestment fund to be administered by members of those communities. 10% of the cannabis excise tax revenue to the to the Cannabis Business Development Fund. Also, designating all tiers of outdoor cannabis cultivation as agriculture, or a designation with similar benefits as agricultural designation as defined in Act 158, 2022, which was talked about last year. Some of those exemptions include local control, as Jesse had spoken to. Also, lifting the current use criteria that is in statute, and including agricultural structures in this designation as well, as John Rogers and others have spoken to. So you're going to hear a lot of overlap. I'm going to be reinforcing a lot of these points. Mind you, these are top priorities for the industry. So in addition to the agricultural designation that's been talked about, we also seek reasonable direct market access for small cultivators and manufacturers that includes seeds and living plants. The allowance for cultivators to own their own cannabis products that are principally produced by their own cannabis flower. This is another thing that Mr. Rogers had spoken to. We are also seeking an increase to home grow allowances, 10 plants, an increase to the manufacturing tier 1 annual gross cap. Right now it's $10,000. We are seeking an increase to $100,000. And then lastly, to support the medical cannabis policies of our coalition, which were put forth by the Green Mountain Patients Alliance. I have included all of these priorities, again, to you guys over email, so you should have them available to you either now or after the meeting. So last year, we held conversations in multiple committees and with several policymakers, including those in the Cannabis Control Board, about the importance of not advancing the adult use market any further without first allocating funds for community reinvestment and a business development fund to help seed, assist, and support those in need and most impacted by cannabis prohibition and systemic racism. Even though we are in an agriculture committee today, every decision we make in this industry must be weighed with the considerations of the harms caused by prohibition and the individuals and communities most affected by the so-called war on drugs. And this is why we're asking lawmakers to allocate 30% total of the cannabis excise tax to these two different funds. Moving on, every year VGA surveys the general public, the cannabis industry, and its members through what we call our annual policy survey. And I want to impart on you, and you've heard this earlier today, direct market access remains a top priority for Vermont licensees and prospective licensees. Some form of direct market access for small cultivators, and I want to underscore, and manufacturers is not optional. In fact, we perceive this to be a missing component of the adult use market structure. Direct to consumer is a pillar of the marketplace. Looking across the country at states with more mature markets, they struggle without this missing component to their market structure. And in some states, they're even beginning to bail out their small producers, something that we see as a theme in other agricultural commodity markets. We're trying to avoid that here in Vermont. As a result, we are asking for on-farm and off-farm direct sales allowances for cultivation tiers, specifically 1 through 2 indoor, 1, 2, 3 tier of mixed, and 1, 2, 3 outdoor. So that is our scale appropriate regulations. And this is to include allowances for all cultivators to sell products manufactured from their plants via wholesale, and then those with direct market access to directly be able to sell those manufactured products to the general public as well. Moving over to manufacturers, we are asking for direct sale allowances for manufacturers tier 1 and 2 with an annual gross cap of 2 million of the cannabis products principally produced by that licensee. So that is our scale appropriate approach to the manufacturing license type category, similar to what we did with the cultivation license type category. And again, I went through a lot there. I've included all of these details and our actual language that we have for direct market in emails to all of you guys. Moving on from there, in committee last year, we also deliberated the agricultural designation of outdoor cannabis cultivation in Bill S-188, which became Act 158. And the conversation last year struck a compromise on limiting those benefits to tier 1 cultivators and those in current use. So this year we're returning, and as was stated earlier today, we are seeking basically to expand those benefits as outlined in 158 to all outdoor tiers of cultivation and the outdoor aspects of mixed category as well. So keep in mind, our mixed cultivation category is part indoor, part outdoor. We are saying the mixed category should not be exempt from this agricultural light designation. And again, this includes exempting local control, as Jesse spoke to, which is very material to not just Charlotte, but several localities across the state right now, which I'm happy to dive into in greater detail. In addition to the local control measures, lifting the current use criteria, and again, including agricultural structures. Not only is this issue of great urgency for the current and prospective licensees, but this is effectively posing a barrier to entry to many farmers that are looking to participate in this market. And we have actually heard from other state agencies, as some of you may be familiar. Not only is the Cannabis Control Board, but I believe also the tax department is in support of these initiatives and rounding out this agricultural designation, if only to simplify the tax code to all outdoor tiers of production. If there's no questions, moving on. Vermont has some of the lowest plant count allowances for adults to grow in their homes, which is proving problematic for most Vermonters, because most Vermonters that choose to grow in their home grow more than 2 plants. So it's really about being practical. New York State just enacted 6 plants for their home grow. And there's likely to be, if you're not aware, a medical cannabis bill this year that the CCB is likely supporting that. So that is going to allow for or seek 6 mature plants. So we're asking lawmakers to increase the home grow allowance for all adults to 10 mature plants, or at least the number that is going to be in the upcoming medical bill. Bringing this to a close, when the CCB first developed its initial rules, it defined a Tier 1 manufacturer license to be an at-home business. That includes an annual gross cap of 10,000, as I said earlier. So those that have this Tier 1 manufacturing license cannot bring in more than $10,000. They have an annual gross cap. At that time, when the board was developing these rules, they couldn't foresee the price gouging that was talked about so eloquently by John Rogers. And I don't use that word loosely. There are wild expenditures associated with starting an adult use business, banking fees, insurance fees, let alone packaging and other regulations that these individuals have to jump through. And we have found that the Tier 1 manufacturing license is not practical. And those that currently have it are operating in the red. Many Tier 1 manufacturers right now are projecting $13,000 to $15,000 minimum in just expenditures. And this is the license with a 10,000 gross cap. So we're asking that this gross cap get adjusted to 100,000. I just want to note that the CCB is currently undergoing a rules amendment process, and they are proposing that this figure get increased to 50,000. We are through the direct feedback of these manufacturers that we are seeking 100,000. Lastly, and just to bring this to an end, while taking all of these priorities into consideration this year and in discussion today, the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition asks everyone here that we not only weigh your decisions with the consideration of the harms caused by prohibition and the individuals and communities most harmed by the so-called war on drugs and systemic racism, but equally by the understanding and recognition of the medical cannabis community, which is an issue that's often not talked about here in Vermont. This is a community, the medical cannabis community, that has unique interests and challenges intrinsic to the patients and caregivers of that community. A medical cannabis program currently exists in Vermont, but has been largely ignored, and as a result has become dilapidated, losing focus of the interests of those it's intended to serve, patients and caregivers. Included in my email to the entire committee is the policy platform of the Green Mountain Patients Alliance. Though it may not be a primary focus of this conversation today, we wish for you to dig into that and become familiar, if you're not already, with the medical cannabis program and the reforms that we're seeking this year. That is my prepared testimony. Again, thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Are there questions from the committee?
No, very helpful.
We only have a limited time left, and we have James Pepper with us, and it would be good to hear from James. You missed some of the testimony, but caught some of the questions or concerns that were raised, and then I understand you're redoing some of your rules and regs, and you know what are you doing to upgrade, and are any of these questions that were raised this morning, and many of them pertain to that list of 17 things. What are you looking at anything that would address these issues? And I think that to get started, I would ask the question, who determines or who did determine that growing hemp and cannabis wasn't an agricultural product? If you know the answer.
Yeah, thank you for the lead in there. For the record, James Pepper from the chair of the Cannabis Control Board. You know, I had a different job when this bill was being debated, but I will say that, you know, I know that over the course of a number of years, it's been through at least 11 different committees. I know at least 4 more had kind of jurisdictional input that they provided. You know, this is the bill that eventually was a kind of compromise bill was, what was the phrase, the camel is a horse made from committee. This is like the ultimate camel of a bill. And that is one of many things that are in statute that create hardships for our small cultivators. And, you know, trying to discern a legislative intent from a 102-page bill that's been voted on, you know, hundreds of times is difficult. But you wrote a legislative intent one time in the bill, and you said that it's the intent of the General Assembly to shift as much of the illegal cannabis market into a regulated space and to encourage participation by small local farmers. And, you know, a lot of what comes after that counteracts that. You know, a lot of the concerns I'm hearing around insurance requirements, and people do pay, people are charged a premium for cannabis insurance. You know, there's no admitted insurers in the state, or I think in any state. I think there's one in California. So these are all surplus line insurers that, you know, can charge essentially whatever they want and exclude whatever they want from their coverage. You know, there's a lot of the, there's no banking, there's no lending, there's no lines of credit. And so, you know, a lot of these people that are getting in to this business really need support right now to make sure that they're not in a worse position, you know, if they have to go out of business, because they've put all of their own personal money into this. And so I know that this list of 20 items, I've been through it with our team at the Cannabis Board. I've seen the Vermont Growers Association list of legislative asks. You know, just given the time, I'm not sure that it makes sense for me to go line by line. I can tell you that some of them are regulatory and we can fix. Some of them are statutory and we can't fix. And to your original question, I think it was the House that said that growing cannabis is not agriculture. I think there's reasons that they did that, you know, as compromises. And I can't speak, you know, I was doing a different job at the time. I can't speak to it, but I'd be happy to kind of walk you through what the consequences might be of kind of changing the designation to agriculture and who you might want to hear from. But our job is not to be an advocacy organization, but we do have this mission to support small local farmers, and it's exacerbated by the fact that if they go out of business, you know, they're in a worse position. You know, now that they're in, now that, you know, they've gotten off the sidelines and shifted into a regulated market, we need to support them.
Well, you know, a few issues that you mentioned, some were, you know, not being able to go to a bank. And the credit union will deal with them, but charge them like $1,500 to deal. You know, that, and I guess I should look in the mirror because a lot of these things, you know, if I'd have spent personally as chair of the Senate Ag, if I'd have spent more time on maybe on this cannabis growing and you know, it wouldn't have happened, or maybe nothing would have happened because we'd have put up such a fight. But we didn't really, Senate Ag didn't really weigh in a great deal on this. It was mostly judiciary and other committees. And I guess we should have been maybe paying more attention. But you know, like the question of if they grow inside their little 1,000 feet in, and that buildings happen to be in use value appraisal, they get built still. And you know, little things like that, if cannabis in some way was classified, especially the small plot, if that was classified as ag, that issue wouldn't even be an issue. And So there's little things that, shouldn't take a lot of effort to fix.
I would totally agree with that. There's little things that can have a tremendous impact, especially when you think there's no lines of credit. I mean, if you're running short 1 month and you don't have the ability to get, credit or financing or a bank loan, you go out of business. And I know that this cessation of operations escrow account, we had a big fear, and we didn't require it for small cultivators, by the way, and we tiered it based on the size of your operation. That was to provide people some kind of cushion so that when they're on the verge 1 month, they can pull from some account and then replenish it within 30 days. But that is one thing that we can do. It's not even in our regulations, the amounts. We can drop those down through guidance. They're in guidance right now. For all of our regulations that aren't statutorily required, we have the ability as the board to have a waiver process. And so what we do is kind of in, some situations, I think with Senator Rogers or John Rogers, we said, well, what's your plan if you're abruptly going to go out of business? And he provided us a plan, and we granted him a waiver in order to kind of reduce the initial barrier to entry.
No, they didn't.
We did not grant you.
No, I asked for one. They still made me put $2,500 in an account.
It's in the mail.
Gotta watch the mail. He'll get you.
Well, I think we're gonna have to.
Have him back.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Have him back.
Yeah, and, look the list over, James, and, the committee's has some concerns, as well. Like we have Vita, that's a farm lending outfit. And if small growers were considered ag, they might be able to get money there. I mean, it's some issues that we've got to look into in the meantime.
If you put together any sort of a document to talk about, if this is the policy and we're trying to encourage local growers, if you put together a document that you could share with people saying, here's are the things that we think don't match what the policy is, or what the outlay statement in the beginning is.
If you look through our rules, you gave us the authority. You said, you need to write regulations around environmental impact, regulations around safety, security, environment, public health, warning labels. You need to write all these regulations. You're allowed as the cannabis board to go through line by line and waive any of these regulations for small cultivators, but you can't waive statutory requirements.
Right.
And so our rules, if you look at our fee waivers, not our fee waivers, just our waiver list, you can kind of see all of the areas where statute conflicts with the needs of small.
So it'd be better if we had the list that's in the statute that you think we could change in a certain direction, that would.
And I gotta say that the list that you have in front of you deals with a number of them. I think what I could do also with this list is
Could you refine that for us?
just let you know what we can do without, and what you would need to do statutorily.
And, we don't wanna do anything that's gonna wreck the program either, so, and none of us are in that business, and I would hope the board would have an understanding, well, if you do this, it's gonna really cause an issue over here. And
So, the thing that's disturbing to me in hearing the small growers that are locally talk about is they've got banking issues, they've got insurance issues, they've got, if I go to set up 1,000 square feet, I'm going to put $100,000 into getting ready. And I see the 15,000 out of state, mostly out of state, and with the financing that they've got more power. that doesn't sound like the policy of, we're trying to encourage the little guy to be the front.
Yeah.
And, you know, sitting here and being part-time and not doing your job or trying to get the business, I need some help to figure out what we should do. And where we should concentrate, because I'm not real fond of the idea of people with 15,000 square feet coming in and driving my little guys out, and my little people.
Any other questions from the committee for James? Good. Well, thank you for coming in, James, and I want to thank all you participants, growers. You know, this has been a good discussion, and certainly you raised some real important issues that maybe we can do some, and some we won't be able to do, but it's good to hear from you and know what the major issues are.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate the committee taking the time to hear us and give us an audience. We think this is a real economic development opportunity, and we see ourselves becoming like the craft beer industry, where people are coming to this state. It's going to increase tourism. It's going to increase revenue, and we think we have a real opportunity here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And please reach out. Use us as a resource. If you want us to come back again, we're the people on the ground. Linda's got all our contact information. Please, if you want us to come back, let us know.
I know if you're outdoor growers, you aren't growing much these days.
The soil's tilling hard today.
That's right.